So humility. When I first started working on this talk, I did some initial searches, basic brainstorming. At first glance, humility, it ain't sexy. And in our American society, it tends to get a bad rap. For we are a society that loves and rewards the shameless self-promoters like no other country. And humility, that sometimes feels like it's only reserved for the passive personalities and maybe the really spiritual, right? It's not us. But I believe, in my humble opinion, that humility is powerful. It's super powerful, and it's a necessary part of success. As I continue, though, to explore this idea past this initial search, the other terms that started to come to mind, terms like self-doubt, openness, being receptive, and a willingness to ask for help, and a being of self-effacing. But a humility alone, that's just not enough. It can't work by itself. You would never get anything done. All you would do is self-doubt. So humility supported by hard work and paralleled with confidence. For me, that's that superhero team that you need to be able to reach each day, to be able to face that challenge, to be able to meet that project. So it's the confidence of this superhero team to be able to get to a new approach, the work ethic to be able to execute the ideas, and the humility to question those first two. So I bring this image up. This is Event Horizon. This was a couple of years ago in 2012. All of those materials, those are just compact discs. For me, this installation, it in many ways visualizes this superhero team. This front surface as those walls curve around the gallery down in Austin, Texas. That's bravado, that's confidence. Look at me, I'm a CD. It's shiny, it's a dramatic event horizon, which is a black hole, the edge where you can't stay away from it. And when you walk around to the other side, it's humility. This is how I'm made. You can see every zip tie, every car ratchet that holds it up to the ceiling, all of the CDs, where they're from and what they were. My favorite pair, a friend of mine, she was cleaning out the bottom of her car, and she found Love Mix 98 and Breakup Mix 99. Yeah. So combining those together, the fact that she gave those to me. So me, I'm constantly for these projects having to ask for help when it comes to the material, but also having to ask for help when it comes to putting these together. There's, in this one, about 9,000 CDs. Everyone has 4 holes drilled, and that's a lot of fishing line to tie them all together. So I have teams of people. So I create little art parties, almost like a little knitting bee, and we sit there and we work on it together, and we talk. We talk about art, and we talk about community. So the artwork itself is the process of being able to create the art, but it's both ends of it are important for me. And then there's an additional experience within this one. When you walk to the back, you can walk all the way around, and the tail of it connects to a theremin on each side. So an audience member can come up and become part of the piece and take over the sculpture so that it becomes their work just as much as their donations. So for this, again, I feel it's in many ways that superhero team all at once. There's my superhero team capes, yeah. So thinking about this, I was trying to think of like, how do you visualize this? Not quite. So I tried this pie graph. That made sense. So, oops, I hit the wrong button. There, pie graph. So that makes sense. Equal balance, nice blend of confidence, nice blend of humility, and a blend of work ethic. So the pink is the confidence. I like pink. And the blue is the work, and this nice soft gray, that's the humility. This would be ideal. Do you know anybody like this? I've been there, yeah. How about this one? Yeah, been there too. So for me, I fully recognize that there have been times that my pie chart has been all over the place to be able to get me here today. It's been out of balance at times. But fortunately, like any well-timed flashback in a movie, 20/20 vision comes into full work. There's a nice soft vignetting when you look back into history, and there's a nice narrator's voiceover. So where am I from? I felt starting geographically would help. I'm from Metropolis, Illinois. It's a little tiny town in southern Illinois. It's about a 6-hour drive from here in Louisville, so you could almost get there faster if you just got in a canoe on the Ohio River to get to my hometown. Google Maps, this is what Google Maps says, oops, wrong one, there. Google Maps says, this is my home, right there. That's where I grew up. My parents still live there. I took their address off of this so nobody can go and do anything. But so all those houses at the top, none of those were there when I was growing up. It was a cornfield across the street. We had a 3-acre front yard. So my sense of space growing up was a really broad, open space that was occasionally punctuated by hay bales. I started to fall in love. This being my visual for 18 years, this is the visual that I fell in love with. This flat horizon line with a moment, and a flat horizon line with another moment. These circles are something that continue to inspire me, and it shows up in my work again and again. You're going to see a lot of circles today. Up at the top, that's my mom and dad. Aren't they cute? Aww. That's before my brothers and sister and I gave them lots of gray hairs. My dad, he is from the Philippines. He's from a small island. He's from a small village on the north side of Mindanao. He's Filipino-Chinese background. And my mom, she grew up in northern Illinois in a small community, Canton, Illinois. And she's a nurse, and she is French-Dutch background. My dad came to the States in the late 60s after he finished medical school. Nice little ER romance. Yeah. So they moved to Metropolis, Illinois, and there's me and my brothers waiting for the school bus. There's that field across the street. So cute. I think of this, though, the reason I bring this up as far as this background, thinking about this background, I grew up in the 80s, and in the 80s, we weren't maybe the most politically correct yet, so whenever filling out those circles for what races, that list, that French, Dutch, Filipino, Chinese, American list, that doesn't fit in any little column. And I remember, sometimes painfully remember, when I was in the 8th grade, I was filling out the little data sheet to be able to do the entrance exam for getting into high school. And I was filling it out, and I got to this part that said race. And it had some basic ones: Caucasian, African American, Native American, Pacific Islander, whatever that is. And then I didn't realize what that was at the time. I really didn't. I was like, what's that? I need to work on my geography. So I got done, and I was like, but what do you do? What do I pick? So I, as quietly as I could, I didn't want to interrupt anybody else taking the exam, walked up to the teacher, and I was like, can I fill in half circles? His response, no, choose one, go sit down, and take the test. I walked back to my little desk, and I have blocked it out. I don't remember what I did. I have no idea what I chose, but I remember how difficult it was to have to choose, that there was these two sides. So I must have chose something because I got to high school. But this moment I think of whenever I think of the way that I think of a material and what I want to do with it. I want to recognize its potential, that middle ground that might not already have a name. We might not understand it. We might not be able to really put our finger to it, but we know that there's something there. And I knew that there was something there. And on top of that, that was a really difficult time period anyway. Identity development, I was 13. 13 is just tough. You couldn't pay me anything to go back to that. Back to this small town. So Metropolis. This little town was poorly named. During the time of the river transportation, they thought it was going to be the next Pittsburgh or the next Cincinnati, and it never got past 7,000 people. So it's like holding your kids back so they'd be big in sports. It didn't work. But in the 20s, when the comic book Superman came out, they were the only metropolis on the map, so they adopted it. They held on to that with some ferocious activity, and to this day, if you go, this is the Superman statue, it's 25 feet tall. All the bricks around the bottom have community members' names. You can find me and my siblings on those bricks. We donate money for it. When you drive into town, these are the billboards you see. So they were gonna, if this is all we got, we are gonna make it and we are gonna run with it. There's a week-long celebration in June. Every June there's a big parade, there's pageants, like super dog competition, you name it. They've owned it. So this idea that you take what you have and you recognize and you push it forward. You don't see it as a drawback, but how can you make it your own? Also, bottom left, So in this small town, I was constantly trying to figure out how do people work? What do you do? So I couldn't figure out what to be a part of, so I just joined everything. So I was in the cheerleading squad, I was captain of the golf team, I ran track, even though I was really bad. I was on the math team, academic team, valedictorian, student body president. I had the high school resume. So I thought that I was doing pretty well. This was my graph. I look back, this was me. But I was also probably like maybe most teenagers. I teach college, so I recognize a lot of my students might come in at this place. You were doing well, and everybody, you finished graduation, and you were feeling awesome. I go to college. I went to University of Notre Dame for college, and I go in, and I'm like, yes, I got this. And then I learned better. I thought I knew how to study. I thought I knew how to make art. I thought I knew how to write a paper. So I had to learn, and learn quickly. That first semester was not pretty. But then it was whenever I found a way, I had to ask for help. I had to seek resources to be able to learn how to function, to be able to learn how to compete, because there was no way I was going back home with my head hung. No. I can do this. I can figure this out. So I then also found myself diving into classes like philosophy of democracy, environmental theology, making of multicultural America, the Irish immigrant experience. The list is huge. Anthropology of art. I still have that book on my shelf today, and I refer back to it all the time. These types of classes, that liberal arts experience, is what grounded me and gives me an idea about what kind of art I want to make. So I finished my work in undergrad. This is what I was making. And I'm glossing over, I'm jumping over all the bad art. I'm saving you from that. I got to my senior year, found my way to the sculpture program thanks to Austin Collins and Jean Dibble helping me find sculpture. And for me, when I first started school, this wouldn't have probably counted as a sculpture. I don't know if I would have realized that art can do this. All these are these little circles, these little circles. They're about an inch and a half in diameter, about a 1/4 inch thick. They're steel cutoffs. When I took steel sculpture, I was introduced to the junkyard. Ooh, that's nice. So I went back for my senior thesis, and I would put my little hard hat on, and I had my 5-gallon bucket, and I would go in, and there was this mountain of all these cutoffs of pieces that nobody wanted, because it was from factories that had been cut out. And I would fish, and I would find all these round ones. I would take them back to my studio, and I would wash them off, and then in the gallery, I would then stack them. So each day for an hour, like a meditation, I would stack them into this vessel form, and all they are stacked. When the show got over, I then deinstalled it, put them back in the buckets, carried them back into my car, and drove them back over to the junkyard and sold them back. No art. Again, I don't know if I would have been able to agree with that whenever I'd first started, because art was an object. Art was something you hung on the wall. So I was challenged by all of my classes and by my faculty to open up, to be humble about the way that I looked at and defined what art could be. And I also recognized that for this object, it had been wanted resource, unwanted cast off, wanted for art, and then back to unwanted when I took it back. I didn't really make a change to it, but for a moment, these cast off pieces were something much more than they had been when they were standing together in that pile. So I get done with undergrad. I had no plans to go to graduate school. I was on fire. I was so excited what I was doing, but I didn't necessarily know what to do next. So I was going to move to Chicago. I was going to go be an artist. Yeah. And then maybe later down the road, go on and do graduate school. That was until Dennis Peacock, he was a professor at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, stopped by Notre Dame to pick up a sculpture he had had on exhibit that I'd walked by for 3 years and didn't even know who it was. Internet was starting up. It was all Netscape. Yeah, the little spinning ball. So I met him, and I was the only student hanging out in the studio that day. I ended up being his assistant to help him install, or to take his sculpture down and load it up. After a little while, he asked what I was up to. Can I see your thesis? So I had no idea at the time. I was on an interview. By the end of the day, he turned around and he let me know that they had rejected every candidate for graduate school, and it was mine if I wanted it. Okay, I'll go to Tennessee. But this graphic, I didn't know I was ready. I didn't think I was ready for that yet. I wasn't sure, especially because everybody else there, they'd applied. They'd gone through the regular system. I didn't apply. I didn't compete in the same way that they did. I better prove that I belong here. So I worked super hard. If I was going to do this thing art, there was no way I was going to fail because I didn't work hard enough. And I was going to do everything I could to try to understand it even more because I felt like I was still not quite there. I was still missing out on something. There was more to know, more to understand. So if my professor asked for one sculpture, I'd make 5. If I was assigned one book, I'd read more beyond that. I'd look up who the resources were behind it. It was sort of like insatiable, but academically insatiable. Because one of the things I learned in undergrad was to learn how to learn. I just wanted to understand more. And if I could figure out how to matrix, somehow download it in, that would be great. So if I could work on that faster, that would be cool. These are some of the pieces I was doing. Still refuse, cutoffs. Styrofoam peanuts collected from offices around campus. Sewer pipe from a construction company. It was clean, I promise. I was not used before. And then cutoffs from another junkyard. I finished with, this was my graduate thesis show, and I brought this into data because it specifically thinks about humility in a way where I was thinking about the consumer capitalist society and where we're constantly encouraged to think about happiness, that there's a promise of happiness. Not as a pursuit, but that you deserve. Why do you feel upset? Something's wrong with you. Here, buy this thing, and it'll make you feel better. And then you buy it, obviously it didn't work. And they don't want it to work very well, so you buy more. So I started thinking about that a lot. But thinking about what is it that I really want to work on? I'd like to be able to wash off my pride, wash off my bitterness, wash off my apathy. Part of me thinks that by just making that choice, we're already making a move towards what it is that we want, what it is that we need, what is it that we're missing by acknowledging which one of those, even if you didn't wash with it. Get done with graduate school, I applied to universities because I found I actually really liked teaching. I did. I didn't know that that's what I wanted to do, but that's what I found myself enjoying because helping a student to be able to do what my faculty had helped me be able to find, that also inspired me and inspired me to be able to think about my work in a different way. So this is where I work now. Hanover College was the fastest at getting an offer out, and I am not a gambler. So whenever and my colleague Deb Whistler, she was on the search team, they caught me after the first interview in the coffee shop and asked me then, so what are you doing next week? No other school was at that speed, so I recognized that they were after something, and we've been able to create some really fabulous things. This is Madison, Indiana. It's 5 miles away. I live in Madison. When I was interviewing, one of the questions was, can you live in a small town? Oh, let me tell you about small, right? So I'm a new professor. I amp my work up, trying to figure out how to do this thing called teaching. And right here, I'm jumping forward a little bit to 2007, 2008. I get tenure. I've now been promoted to associate professor. All that work I had done, I've been focusing, trying so hard to figure out what I was doing, but I'd had my head down, working. And with tenure came the opportunity for sabbatical. With sabbatical, time off. I had never had time off. What is this thing called time off? So I like that idea, but for sabbatical, for a professor, that comes with a requirement of an additional year that you have to stay there to pay them back for the time that they paid you. So I would be committing to Hanover for 2 years. Now, it's nothing against Hanover. We're talking about Leticia issues with this, commitment issues. There's a reason I have no tattoos anywhere. It's not pain, it's permanence. How do you choose? So this idea that I was going to commit to stay for that many more years was hard. But I recognized, I looked up and I looked around, and I wasn't part of anything. I had a few close friends that were part of my creative community, but I looked around and I had sort of dug myself into a hole. This was in my sketchbook at that time. That little person up there, that's me, looking down into the hole, and then this is this abyss of, oh my gosh, what have I done? I've sort of, kept myself sheltered away. So I was doing all these artworks that were starting to look at perception. I was going back to a poem I had written years ago. The poem reads, perception is dependent on the relationships present. Present relationships are dependent on perception. So I was thinking about that a lot as far as we're only upset or sad if we let ourselves, was what I was thinking about. I was looking for the grass being greener, but I stopped watering my own grass because I was so worried about something else being better. So I'm making these types of artworks. I was trying to find a way to be able to include this text in a way that you could walk around it, and I couldn't figure it out. So I went to Walmart. Yes, I went to Walmart. It's Madison, Indiana. After 9 p.m., if you need anything called art materials, it's the only game in town. So I'm at Walmart, I'm walking around, and I find this shopping cart they'd put out that was like triple clearance. It was clearance, clearance, extra clearance. And it was filled with bath mats, all these bathroom rugs that nobody else wanted. And I felt so sad for them. Oh, I felt sad because some person, someplace made all of these, and the bath mats, they didn't do anything wrong. So I bought the whole cart. And I took them home. Other people feel empathy for puppies and windows. I felt empathy for bath mats. So I took them home, and I had drawn out this whirlpool, kind of like the sketch, and started cutting the bath mats with scissors, and then cutting the text out with a nail scissor, and then the text wraps around, so that way you keep spiraling. And this is what it looks like when it was, oops, wrong one, when it was finished. So moving forward, getting better, maybe a little bit more balanced. Back to that hole, I felt sort of stuck in a way. I didn't know anyone. So one of my commitments, I decided to stay at Hanover and to take that sabbatical, to jump in, but my requirement for myself was I was going to reach out. I started going down, oh, this is a faculty meeting agenda sheet. This is naughty faculty professor here. So I saw that. I made it a commitment that I was going to start going to Louisville, coming down here for First Fridays. So I was going to do it, and I came down all by myself. I didn't know anybody in Louisville. It's only an hour away, and I still didn't know anybody in Louisville. So I came down, and I was determined, I'm going to meet 3 people at this gallery before I leave. Oh my God, that was so hard. I think I only made it to like 2 galleries before I had to go home. So, I know, sad. So, but I was putting my vulnerable hat on. I'm going to do this because this is important. So if I tried the next time, but that time I got smart. I called, because everybody else had friends. I called the 2 people I knew in Louisville who were in the arts community because I'd been in an exhibition with them. And found out, are you guys going to be there? Can I come join you and your friends? So I walked around, and they introduced me to a few people who introduced me to a few more people, and that led to more shows and more opportunities and a much wider community. It led to this installation. So I hadn't started working on these CDs yet, and I was working on these really hideous water bottle sculptures. I don't know what I was thinking. They were free. I like the price free. And a friend of mine had collected all these water bottles and came over to my house, brought them to give me on my sabbatical because I'm not going to my office, brought them to my house, and was like, here's these water bottles, but I also have this box of CDs. Nobody recycles CDs. So do you want them? So I like free material. Sure. I had no idea what to do with them. Put them over on the side of the studio, and I'm working on these water bottles. I can figure this out. I can do it. But I continued to work on it, looking over at those CDs. No. Focus. So finally, I went over to the CDs, picked them up, and started sort of theorizing about what is a CD. It's memory. It's memory both digital, and it's memory analog when you look at the other side, like that story earlier about the breakup mix. But it's also a material that I remember when they came out. I didn't have a CD player. I didn't have enough money. My allowance was too small to be able to own a CD player, let alone I had no idea what bands to even buy or who to be. I was so not cool. So I didn't know what to do. It just seemed like magic. And for my little lifetime, for a material to go from being the trend to now being the thing that we throw away because we download everything, oh, this is my new material. This is my new bath mat. So I'm working on this installation for Heron School of Art up in Indianapolis, and I'm doing this large installation. I never do anything first time in the gallery because I know I'm going to mess up. It's me. I know there's going to be a lot of mistakes. So I work really hard to do a trial in my studio first. So this was my first full-scale trial. It ended up like this. This was the first CD piece in 2009. I think this one had 6,000 CDs. It's titled Entropy, a Vortex of Useless Memory. Where do all those memories go? And then I got an offer to do a show here in Louisville at the Cressman Center. Some of you may have seen it. So at the Cressman Center, I had to suspend that sculpture, and I wanted to use the windows in that space. But I had to hang it from the ceiling. Always site-specific, had to try something else. This is me fighting with the CDs, trying to figure out how in the world do I suspend these. I came up with like 40 ways to not make CD art. Oh my goodness. But I figured out, oh, if I hang them vertically and sit inside of it, I can drill them together. And then I was like, okay, well now I have to hang it. This is the first trial. Oh my gosh, that's hideous. It overlaps in this weird way. When you get up close, you just want to turn away and run. So I was like, oh, what else can I do? Oh, if I put the hoops on the outside, that'll be better, and it'd be cleaner, and then at least I can use the color of the hoops. And then I lift them up, fill it in. I'm figuring all this out as I go. It's lots of problem solving. And again, I'm on sabbatical right now, so I'm super grateful because I couldn't have done this without making that choice. And this is that one we looked at earlier. This is combining both the entropy one, which was a wall, and the one that I was working with hanging them, which is a suspended one. This one had both. This is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at Living Arts. This is last year. It's 70 feet long, and it has one theremin in the back, and it snakes around this entire space, entirely suspended. And this is one of my most recent ones. It's 6 feet by 6 feet by 4 feet. It's titled Tesseracts. Again, circles. This form of the circle is something that I find myself returning again to again and again and again. You walk to the back, still humble. It's like a theater set. When you watch a theater play, the front might look like a Victorian home. You walk to the back, and it's styrofoam and duct tape holding it together. It's our sense of belief. So what I like about these forms is that from the outside, they appear to be seamless and confident and beautiful, and you walk to the end, you walk around it, and you realize how it was made, that it isn't magic. It isn't anything special. You could do it if you look at it long enough. You could figure out how to make a Leticia piece. And right now, this one's on exhibit here in Louisville over at First Build, over near the U of L campus. So with that, this is where I like to think that I am now. So that's pretty present day. Or this is what I'd like to convince myself that I am now. Ask me in a few years when this day is sort of a back look, and I'll let you know whether or not I was right. But this whole process of writing this talk and thinking about what I would say about humility, I went back to a quote that I like from Andrew Stanton. Andrew Stanton is one of the Pixar guys, and I have a little girl, so I watch a lot of Pixar at home. And again, I'm a nerd. I like to nerd out on something. So if I'm going to watch Pixar, I'm going to learn everything I can about Pixar. So this is one of his quotes. Use what you know, draw from it. That doesn't always mean plot or fact. It means capturing a truth from your experience and expressing values you personally feel deep down in your core. And when I first came across that, I was like, oh, that's it. I didn't always know I wanted to make CD art or any of the other pieces about cast-off, but it has something to do with that upbringing, about that sense of that small town, recognizing what it has. That look at what is it that I am? What happens if I don't fit into a bubble? So realizing what those values are, that's where our artwork starts. So in closing, I have a couple of questions and a thought. Don't we all want to rise to something greater than we are? Don't we all feel humble and cast aside and a little bit small sometimes? But when we come together, so we can become so much more. Without humility, there's no motivation to come together.